Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Experience Arc. My name is Becky Cook and today we are continuing with anxiety disorders and we are going to be talking about phobias. So the simplest definition for a phobia is a persistent irrational fear of a specific object or subject of some sort. And then you also have the avoidance of it. Because it is this persistent, exaggerated fear that someone has, this is actually one of the most common DSM diagnoses. Most people with a phobia typically will go completely out of their way to avoid whatever they are afraid of, even if that is disruptive to their life or messes their life up in some way. So when we talk about phobias, there's really three specific types of phobias. There's a social phobia, agoraphobia, and then a specific phobia. So in my previous video, I did talk a little bit about agoraphobia and panic disorder, and today we are actually going to get a lot more into agoraphobia, and that's kind of going to be the one that I'm going to start off with. People with agoraphobia, a lot of times we think of it as being afraid of the outdoors, being afraid of the outside, so they stay at home all the time. Really what's going on is they're afraid of very crowded areas, and they're also afraid of wide open spaces. So if it's a wide open space and it's also crowded, it can be very fearful for them, which obviously makes you very reluctant to leave your home if you do have agoraphobia, considering that there are many places that are very wide open or crowded. So it kind of develops after panic attacks occur, and that's very frequent for people with agoraphobia. It's very commonplace to know that they do have panic attacks of some sort, and that's kind of where this developed from. So people with agoraphobia are not really afraid of public places per se. It's more the fact that they have this fear and that they are afraid they're going to have a panic attack in a public place and they won't be able to escape it or get help. People with agoraphobia will refuse to leave their house, or they'll only go out with a certain type of companion or someone that they significantly trust. There are some very rare cases where people do develop agoraphobia without the history of any panic attacks. So next we're going to talk a little bit about social phobias and what a social phobia is. For someone with a social phobia, their fear is very much focused on social settings. So it's focused on situations where there is a possibility of being judged in some sort of form socially. Some examples would be public speaking, or even just meeting new people can be very fearful for them. People with social phobia feel as though people are watching them very closely all the time and waiting for them to kind of mess up in a way or to find something that they can judge about them. And it's this fear that people are just going to be looking for signs of inadequacy in them, and kind of that fear of almost a social rejection. So people with social phobia typically realize that their fears are exaggerated and excessive, but their worries still interfere with their daily functioning and can typically cause considerable emotional distress for them. People with social phobias may refuse to eat, drink, or speak publicly, and then some may even go as far as to refuse to ever use a public restroom. And people with social phobias, when they go out into a social setting that they may have a fear of or may be uncomfortable in, it's very possible for them to get so fearful and so anxious that they do end up having a panic attack. And even so, people with social phobias will avoid that experience of fear and anxiety and stress that they associate with certain social situations, and avoid it so much to the extent that it could harm them not only economically but also emotionally. Now I'm going to move into specific phobias. So a specific phobia is basically kind of any other phobia that is not a social phobia or agoraphobia. There are essentially four common types of specific phobias. The first one is the animal type. So obviously I said arachnophobia, the fear of spiders. People can also have a phobia of snakes, a phobia of dogs and other animals. Then there is the natural environment type of specific phobia, in which someone could be afraid of tornadoes. They could be afraid of heights, afraid of water. The third type of specific phobia is a blood injury phobia, in which someone could be afraid of the sight of blood, afraid of injury, afraid of needles. And lastly, there is a situational type in which someone could be afraid of flying on an airplane, enclosed spaces, and some are even afraid of elevators. So many people that experience specific phobias recognize that their fear is excessive and not warranted, but they aren't really able to talk themselves out of being afraid. So when it comes to phobias have one of the largest lifetime prevalence rates, and that rate is 9 to 24% of the population. So when it comes to diagnostic criteria, again, I'm going to make my blanket statement. Please do not self-diagnose yourself. The first diagnostic criteria is persistent, irrational fear of a specific object or of something or of a situation. The next diagnostic criteria is the fact that the exposure to whatever someone may have a phobia of essentially elicits this very intense anxiety-formed reaction. The third diagnostic criteria is that the person with the phobia recognizes the fact that this fear is excessive and irrational. The phobic object or situation is typically going to be avoided at all costs as a diagnostic criteria, and if it can't be, it will be persisted with very deep and intense forms of anxious behavior and will also cause distress to the person with the phobia. The avoidance, anxious anticipation, or worry about the feared object or situation will essentially interfere with daily life and can significantly interfere with just normal functioning for many of these people. And then on top of that, there is also significant distress just for the fact of having a phobia. When it comes to comorbidity, obviously with agoraphobia, we see comorbidity with panic disorder that we talked about in our last video, but it can also be comorbid with other anxiety disorders and mood disorders. And then there's also some research out there that does suggest that phobias are comorbid with some physical diseases and disorders as well. When it comes to treating phobias, the best form of treatment is essentially exposure therapy. So part of the reason that it helps is that exposure therapy is not really like having someone that's afraid of spiders walk into a room full of spiders. You start with the smaller steps, like something that is more common to happen in daily life, like a spider in your house. Spiders live in houses all the time, maybe a spider in your basement, right? So they're gonna start with, well, you don't have to go near it, but you know where it is, so just look at it and then take a step closer. And you kind of take slowly steps until you kind of build up to the point where they actually hold a spider or certain things like that, where they're interacting with it a lot more, and it kind of gets rid of that fear. So it's almost this belief that experience gets rid of fear. Some other forms of treatment that also really help with phobias is a talking therapy or medication, but exposure therapy is by far the best for dealing with phobias and for dealing with people with phobia disorders. So I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching this video. I know this one is going to be kind of a lot shorter than the other ones. Like, comment, and subscribe. Bye guys!